Welcome to Amazing Dinosaurs. I'm Dave, and this is a collection of Jurassic World T-Rexes versus Steve from Minecraft. Let's first start by unboxing the Steve figurine. And here it is. Steve is wearing the blue pants with a teal colored shirt. And overall, it's a pretty cool figure. You can move the arms up and down. You can move the legs back and forth. You can move the head side to side and even up and down a little bit. And this Steve figure actually has hands, so you can remove this. And then there's a spot to put in some tools. Plus, Steve came with these other accessories that we will check out in a little bit. But first, let's meet our first T-Rex to face off against Steve. This is the super colossal Tyrannosaurus Rex in the custom painting. This is one of my most unique T-Rexes in the collection because it has this fiery styled paint job all over it. Plus, this super colossal figure actually has a stomach compartment all the way down here, so you can actually feed it smaller dinosaurs and it'll be stored in its stomach here. Now then, let's go ahead and face this off against Minecraft Steve. All right, look at that size difference. Steve is way over here. It's a tiny little figurine. I bet he could even fit inside of the T-Rex's mouth. And it's interesting, they both got different color combos going on. Steve is in a more blue and cool colors, whereas the T-Rex is in fiery red tone. The next T-Rex to face off is another custom colored Tyrannosaurus Rex, but this one is in a camouflage green coloring. I think this coloring is way better than the original painting, especially around the face here. Check out those teeth and all the shading around its eyes and the rest of its face. So now let's face this T-Rex off against Minecraft Steve. And as you can see, there's still a huge size difference between the two, although this one is a bit more closer in size than the super colossal one. And this T-Rex actually has a really cool chomping ability that chomps downwards. I don't think you or I or Steve would want to be in the way of those chompers. Our next T-Rex is another green T-Rex, but this is actually the original painting. This is the Legacy Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex. It has a darker green body with some gray and tan detailing along the top of its back, and it has a button at the top of its head for the chomping action. And now let's face that off against Steve. And the T-Rex is still quite a bit larger. You can see that it stands way over Steve's head still, although they're getting closer in size now. What do you think? Would Steve stand a chance in a fight against a T-Rex like this? I think we gotta give Steve some tools, which we'll give him in the next round. I think this next T-Rex is a little bit larger. This is the new 93 Real Feel Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus Rex. And it's called the Real Feel T-Rex because its skin is actually a soft rubber, unlike most of the figures nowadays, like these ones over here that are hard plastic. Plus, this T-Rex has a stomach compartment as well, so just like the super colossal T-Rex, you can feed this smaller one small dinosaurs. And finally, it's got some sound effects as well. Now it's time to face off against Steve. And yeah, this T-Rex is a whole lot larger than that green one over there was. And just like the super colossal T-Rex, we've got two different styles of coloring. We've got the cool blue coloring over here with Steve and the fiery red coloring over here. Although this one looks a lot more realistic than the custom colored painting over here. Let me know in the comments below, who do you think would win in this fight? But before you comment, I'm going to give Steve a tool here now. And that tool is his mighty sword. And this thing is actually made of metal. So this is actually quite heavy. Whereas the actual Steve figurine over here, I think is entirely made out of plastic. So now let's go ahead and give him the sword. And now Steve is ready to face off with the T-Rex. Comment below, who do you think would win in a battle? The next T-Rex is a very unique one. This is actually a deconstructed Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now this T-Rex is made so that you can actually see the insides of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. You can see some intestines there, there's a bunch of bones, and you can actually lift off the ribs right here to reveal what I think is the stomach underneath. That's pretty crazy looking. So now it is time to face off against Steve. And since this T-Rex can't even stand up, Steve is actually the taller one in this competition. And in fact, it actually looks like Steve already defeated this T-Rex because the T-Rex is already taken apart and totally destroyed. All right, way to go, Steve. Next up is another orange-brown T-Rex here, pretty similar to the deconstructed T-Rex that we saw right here. But obviously this one still has all of its limbs, although you can see quite a bit of battle damage on its tail, on its leg, on its side, and even on its face. So this T-Rex figure is in much better shape than the last. So now it's time for the face-off. Now once again, Steve is way shorter than the T-Rex here. And he's got a sword, but that might not do it. Let's go ahead and add his final accessory, which is this armor plating here. And these are actual real metal. So let's go ahead and add them on. All right, now Steve is armored up and ready for anything. And I gotta say, with all this actual real metal armor plating, Steve is a lot heavier than he was originally. It's pretty cool that they actually used metal for the armoring. And now, who do you think would win in this competition? Steve or the Tyrannosaurus Rex? The next T-Rex is the smallest T-Rex that we've seen yet in this collection. This is a juvenile T-Rex, and it is actually from Jurassic Park. You can see the tattoo on its leg right there. So this figure is quite old. And like many of the old Jurassic Park figures, it has the real feel skin, so it's a soft rubbery skin instead of hard plastic. And it's got a big old battle damage right on its side right there, which is pretty cool. Now it's time to face off the juvenile T-Rex versus Minecraft Steve. But wait, I've actually got a little surprise for you. And that is, I actually bought another set from Minecraft. This is the wolf set from the Diamond Level series. And here is the wolf figurine. It's a bit smaller than Minecraft Steve, but it's still quite posable. You can see that you can move its torso up and down, you can move its tail, and each of its legs individually, as well as its head. Plus, it came with these 4 accessories. First is this extra head that has different eye shapes compared to the original one right here. It also comes with this collar that you can put on the wolf, as well as this piece of meat right here, and a bone. So let's go ahead and set the wolf right next to Steve, and here we are with our face-off. Who do you think would win? Steve and the wolf, or the juvenile T-Rex? This T-Rex here is a similar size as the last, although it's very different in its coloring. And it should be noted that this is actually a model Tyrannosaurus Rex. So it is a hard plastic all over, and it does not move at all. It is stuck in this roaring pose. But it's still pretty cool. It's got some pretty decent coloring. It's got the yellow eyes and then tons of shading along its body as well. So let's face it off against Minecraft Steve. Oh, look at that. They're almost the same in height. The T-Rex is a little bit taller still. And this T-Rex sure looks fierce, but Steve is fully armored up with his sword and with his wolf companion. So comment below, who do you think would win, the T-Rex or Steve and the wolf? One of our final T-Rexes. This one has some cool orange-brown coloring with the black stripes all along its back and on its legs. And like the last figure, this is a model figure, so there are no joints or arms or jaws that move on this figure, but it does have some pretty sizable teeth. And now let's face off against Minecraft Steve. And look at that, Steve is finally taller than one of the T-Rexes here. And not only that, but I think Steve is actually heavier than the T-Rex figure here as well. So now that the sizes are a lot more even, who do you think would win? Comment below. And now here is our final T-Rex, and by far the smallest one. This one is from Jurassic World, and it looks like it's mostly brown in color, but it does have this reflective gold coloring all over its body. Plus, despite how small it is, you can still open and close the mouth. That is pretty cool. Now let's face it off against Minecraft Steve, and look at that size difference. Steve is probably 3 times the size of this Tyrannosaurus Rex, and even the wolf is larger than the T-Rex. It's at least maybe like twice the size of this teeny tiny T-Rex. Now this does not look like a fair fight at all. The first super colossal figure in this collection is the Giganotosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. It has this soft green coloring with the black detailing all over its side and its back. It's got a pretty large spine running along its back and some really cool teeth in its mouth. And you'll see that many of these super colossal figures have a stomach compartment, so why don't we go ahead and feed this Giganotosaurus some miniature dinosaurs. And let's set it on the left side right over here. Next up is the super colossal Velociraptor blue figure. This one might be one of my favorite super colossal figures. It of course has the iconic blue stripe running down the side. It's got some huge claws on its hands. And this raptor figure actually comes with more colored eyes than many of the other super colossal figures. So let's set it next to the Giganotosaurus and let's feed it a few miniature dinosaurs. Next, I've got a custom colored Indoraptor figure. Now this figure was actually originally a Velociraptor blue figure, but it was custom colored to look like an Indoraptor. And as you probably noticed, I've got the real Indoraptor super colossal figure that we'll check out next. So of course you can see that these two are identical in size and shape, and the big difference is the coloring. You'll see that the Indoraptor still has the gold stripe, pretty similar to Velociraptor blue over here. Now let's give it a few miniature dinosaurs to eat. And let's move on to the next one. Here it is. It is time to open up the brand new super colossal Dino Trackers Indoraptor figure. And here it is, the newest super colossal figure that Jurassic World has released. And this is a totally new design. It's not a copy of the T-Rex figures or the Raptor figures. First of all, it's got these little spikes on its back, which I think only the Indominus Rex super colossal figures has. It of course has the gold coloring running along its side all the way up to its neck. Looks like it has smaller claws than the Raptor figures have. And then on the face, it's got some more spikes behind its head right here. It's kind of a soft rubber. It's got some dark red eyes and some really interesting looking teeth. These are really long, and some of them are actually kind of sticking out to the side, which is pretty unique. I don't think another super colossal figure does that. Now when we compare it to the custom colored one that used to be a raptor, looks like this figure's face is maybe a little bit larger than the raptor version. Its teeth are definitely a lot more prominent. And yeah, look at that. Here are the raptor's claws, and then this is the Indoraptor's claws. So quite a bit shorter. But all in all, I'd say this is a pretty awesome figure, and I'm super excited to have it in my collection finally. The next figure here is a custom colored Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. It features a bright red coloring with some yellow detailing right along the black, and some pretty cool shading and texturing all over its face. Its teeth are a bit gritty looking, like it's been in battle. Overall, this is pretty awesome. Now let's feed all 3 of these, because I think I forgot to feed all of them. Next up, why don't we grab another T-Rex? This figure is another custom colored T-Rex, but this one is in a blue-gray coloring. It has some bright red eyes and some darker gray teeth. And other than that, I think it's pretty much the same as this other T-Rex over here. And let's give it a few mini dinos for it to snack on. Next up, why don't we go with the Indoraptor from Jurassic World Dominion. It features a similar body as the raptors that we saw earlier, although it does have some different texturing and bumps along its body, and the top of its head is different too, I think. And just like in the movie, it has the white body with the brown and light brown striping. Now let's set this up next in line, and let's feed it a dinosaur. Next up, we've got the Indominus Rex Super Colossal figure. This one, I believe, came as part of Camp Cretaceous. It's got some pretty cool spikes and bumps on its back, and the larger spikes right on the back of its head. And similar to the new Indoraptor Dino Trackers figure that I've got right over here, this Indominus Rex also has the teeth that stick outside of its mouth and are a whole lot larger. Now let's set it in place next to the Indoraptor, and let's feed it a small dinosaur. Next, we're gonna go with the Super Colossal Carnotaurus Toro figure. This figure has some different coloring than all the other Super Colossal figures because it has the clay red coloring and the brown top. And just like the Indominus Rex, has a bunch of bumps and spikes along its back. But even better, this figure has 2 horns on the top of its head. Now let's set this Carnotaurus up next in line, and let's feed it a snack. The next figure I'm showing you is the Jurassic World Dominion Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. This figure is also pretty recent compared to many of these other figures, and it features some unique coloring compared to all the other Super Colossal T-Rex figures that I have, with the dark brown and the black on top. And like all the other T-Rex figures, it has a row of clean teeth on the top of varying sizes, and then a row of smaller teeth on the bottom. So next, let's feed it a small dinosaur. This next figure is one of the longest Jurassic World figures that I have. This is the Dreadnoughtus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. I mean, this figure is crazy. Look how long its neck is, and there's its body, and then a super long tail. It just keeps going. And I think that is pretty amazing. It's crazy that they came out with a figure this large. And it's still detailed enough that you can even open and close its mouth. Next, we're going with another T-Rex figure. I think this figure might have been released as part of the Fallen Kingdom collection, either that or maybe Camp Cretaceous. And this T-Rex features the light orange coloring, and it gets a little bit to a darker brown along the top of its body. It has some nice shading and detailing along its face. It's got the yellow eyes, and of course, the teeth, very similar to the Dominion T-Rex's teeth over here. And here's its little dino snack. Next is the Jurassic World Dominion Brachiosaurus figure. And this figure might be the tallest Super Colossal figure that I have in my collection. Look how much taller it is compared to the T-Rexes. It features some speckled coloring along its back, and it has the lighter underbelly that goes up its neck, and then along its face, it has some pretty cool reflective blue paint. Plus, you can open and close the mouth too. Now let's set this next in line and move on to our next figure. Next up is another T-Rex figure, and this one might be my favorite T-Rex figure because of its camo green coloring and its huge battle damage on the side. I doubt you'll be able to find a T-Rex with this type of coloring because this T-Rex was custom colored. So I think it actually used to be an all orange figure. I think it was actually this figure. You can see that it does have some battle damage right there. And in this custom colored painting, they actually just colored that in and added a bunch other cool details too. But sadly, this figure is really old, so as you can see, a lot of its teeth in its mouth are actually broken. But that doesn't mean it can't enjoy a little dino snack. And finally, I've got the Jurassic World Dominion Apatosaurus figure. As you can see, this figure stands a little bit shorter than the Brachiosaurus figure right here, and the Dreadnoughtus figure right here, and definitely is not as long as the Dreadnoughtus figure. And it features the camo green coloring with some lighter detailing along the top of its back. It's got all those stripes and a little tiny head up front that you can turn and move around and even open and close the mouth too. And that is all of my Super Colossal figures. Which one is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Let's get started with the largest figure. This is the Indominus Rex figure. And this figure from Dino Trackers is pretty special because it is actually a camo Indominus Rex. Check out that glowing green color in its neck and in its body. Now let's grab the next biggest dinosaur, which is this Tyrannosaurus Rex. I just bought this figure, and this is the Hunt and Chomp T-Rex. It's got pretty cool, unique coloring. It's got a headpiece and a new attack feature. Now let's set it up next in size, right next to the Indominus Rex. Let's see, now next in size is probably this Indoraptor figure. This Dino Trackers Indoraptor has a reflective blue skin coloring along with its classic gold stripe, and it has a variety of attack buttons. And let's set that up next in line, next to the T-Rex. Next, we're gonna grab this Epic Attack Carnotaurus figure. This Carnotaurus has the iconic clay red coloring. You can use the tail to move the head around, and there's a button to open and close its jaw. But best of all are these buttons on the side for more sound effects and lights too. That's pretty cool, so let's set him up as the next biggest dinosaur in this collection. I think it's time to open up this new Dino Trackers Habitat Defender Triceratops. Now I think this by far is the largest Triceratops I have in my entire collection. This Dino Trackers Triceratops has mostly brown coloring, it has a lighter underbelly, and some accenting on the top of its body. It of course has some huge horns coming out of its head and a very large frill. So overall this is really cool. And overall it actually feels more lightweight than a lot of figures, which is interesting for how big it is. But anyways, let's put this as the next biggest dinosaur in our Dino Trackers line. Next up, we're gonna grab this Sinotyrannus figure. This figure has a mostly dark green body, but this has some bright green and red along its face. And there's two hidden action buttons. One has a chomping action, and the other button has a tail swinging action. And let's set that up next in line. Here I've got a really weird looking dinosaur. I believe this one is called the Bistavasaur, something like that. It's a pretty unique name and a very unique looking dinosaur. It's got a tan colored body and black with a little bit of red and two hidden action buttons. One moves its head up and down for chomping, and the other actually activates these spines on its back. Let's get that one next in line right here. Now let's go for this huge Stegosaurus figure from the Dino Tracker series. It of course has the tracker backpack and some really cool coloring, plus two hidden action buttons on its back. The one on this side swings its tail upwards, and the button on the other side here swings its tail side to side. And so let's put this one next in line right here. Next up is this Orcoraptor figure, a very strange and unique looking dinosaur. It has a dark green and black body with feather texturing on the underside of its body, and a lever action on its back for some sound effects and chomping actions. So let's put that next in line. Next, let's grab this Eocarcharia dinosaur. This dinosaur has feather texturing over its entire body and is a lot more brightly colored than the Orcoraptor that we just saw. And it also has the lever on its back for chomping and sound effects. And there it is, next in line. Over here, we've got the Dryptosaurus figure. This figure has a dark brown and gray colored body with tons of spikes running from tail to head and a slide lever for the chomping action. And now let's put it next in size in line. And next up, this one isn't tall, but it certainly is quite large. This aquatic dinosaur is the Elasmosaurus. It's got a bright blue body and a super long neck, and two action buttons on its back. One moves its neck up and down, and the other moves its neck side to side and opens its mouth too. That's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and set it in line. Next up, let's grab the Regaliceratops figure. This dinosaur looks pretty similar to a Triceratops. It has the large frill in the front with some horns. It's got some sound effects, as you can hear, and it has a slide lever action on its back for more sound effects and movement. And let's put that right next to the Elasmosaurus. Over here, we've got the Diabloceratops dinosaur. This figure is bright red, and it has a light brown underbelly and a ginormous frill with some horns. And of course, it has a lever on its back for some sound effects and head movement. Here is the Nigersaurus dinosaur in the bright green and dark green coloring. It's got a super long neck and a super long tail as well, and the lever on its back for moving its head. And let's put that next in line here. Next up is this new Irritator dinosaur. This figure features quite a few different colors. It's got dark brown, light brown, some bright green, and some red eyes. And it has the lever on its back for the sound effects and chomping action. So let's put that right next to the Nigersaurus. Here is the Epic Attack Dilophosaurus figure. Now it's pretty small and you can't move the frills on its head, unfortunately, but it does have this cool button on its side, the lights, and a bunch of sound effects. This is a pretty cool figure, so let's put this next in line. Next in line is this new figure. I believe it's pronounced the Piatnitskysaurus. This figure has some pretty cool dark blue coloring with some bright green striping along the top, and even some orange and red along its face. It's also got quite a few spikes along the top of its face and underneath its chin as well, and a tiny little spine running along its back. So let's put that right next to the Dilophosaurus. Next up is the Scutosaurus figure in the bright orange coloring with some dark blue accenting along its back and its face. And check out those interesting horns coming out of its cheeks on both sides of its face too. It's pretty cool. Set that up next in line. Now let's check out the other new figure that I've got, the Pristosuchus figure. It looks like this dinosaur walks on all four legs. It has a dark green body with some lighter accenting along its back, and then a brown face. Plus, it has an action button right here on its back for a massive chomping action. Let's set that up next in line and grab our next dinosaur, which is a Zuniceratops figure. Now I have an older version of the Zuniceratops, but this one has new coloring, which is the brown, the tan, and the black. And it has an action button on its back for a stabbing action with its horns. So we'll set that up there. And our last figure, although it's not very small, it's the shortest. This is a Kronosaurus figure. Now this aquatic dinosaur is dark blue on the top and tan on the underbelly. And it has a lever right on its back for some sound effects and chomping action. And let's set that up as the final dinosaur in our Dino Tracker's biggest to smallest collection. Let's first start by checking out the Mario figure that will be facing off against the Predators. This is the official Super Mario. It's a me, Mario. And here he is. It's quite a large figure, and this one has some pretty cool features to it. First off, his overalls are actual real fabric. You can see here that I can move it around, and that's really cool. That definitely gives it a whole added dimension. And the rest of the figure is a hard plastic, but it is surprisingly adjustable. You can move the arms in all directions, as well as the legs. You can even bend the knee joint as well, and then you can swivel the head side to side as well. And the coolest part is that this comes with a variety of action features and sound effects. The first special feature is when you press Mario's hand, it comes with some sound effects. So with his right hand, it has the coin collecting sound effect as well as his voice. And with his left hand, let's see what that sounds like. So he's got a punching sound effect on this side. And there's also sound effects in his shoes when he kicks something. It's got that little sound, and then his voice, of course. And then the final sound effect button is on his hat. When you press it, he's got more voice sound effects and music.
me, Mario.
Now it's time to check out the first predator in this collection, and this is the super colossal Indoraptor figure. This is one of the newest super colossal figures that Jurassic World has released. It's got the iconic gold stripe running down the side and the black body, and my favorite part are these teeth right here. I love how they stick out and intertwine with the top row. That's so cool. Plus, like all of the other super colossal figures, this Indoraptor has a stomach compartment so you can actually feed it smaller dinosaurs through its mouth down to its stomach. So now it is time to face them off. Mario versus the super colossal Indoraptor. Now right off the bat here, you can see there is a huge size difference between the two. The super colossal Indoraptor is by far the largest. Now Mario has some cool sound effects and buttons, and the Indoraptor has some really great texturing as well as that ability to eat smaller dinosaurs. So who do you think would win in a fight, the Indoraptor or Mario? Our next predator to face off against Mario is this huge Tyrannosaurus Rex. This T-Rex figure is from the Jurassic World Dominion movie, and it comes in this dark brown coloring with the black detailing on the top of its back and elsewhere. It's got the bright yellow eyes, and it has an action on its tail to swing the torso back and forth and to chomp the jaw. Check out how big that chomp is. Plus, it looks like there's actually some room in there to fit smaller dinosaurs if it wants to eat some. And now it's time for the T-Rex to face off against Mario. These two figures are a whole lot closer inside, although I think the T-Rex still wins the prize for being taller. And in terms of weight, let's see which one's heavier. This T-Rex actually isn't that heavy, and Mario here, I think, is a bit heavier. So this one's taller, but Mario is the heavier figure. Now then, who do you think would win in a fight? This T-Rex figure or the Mario figure? The next predator to face off is this super special Spinosaurus figure. This Spinosaurus figure is pretty rare. It's in the blue coloring with the yellow detailing on its spine, on its legs, and on its face too. It has a button on the top of its head for the chomping action, but the main reason why this is so special is because of this hidden battle damage on the side that you can open up and reveal its insides. You can actually even lower the ribs as well, and then there's a hidden button over here to make the stomach swirl back and forth. And look at that, there's even some liquid inside of it. So now let's face it off against the one and only Mario. Now with the Spinosaurus standing up all the way, it looks like it's a little bit taller than the Mario figure, or just about the same if you lower it down a little bit. And they've both got their special features here. The Spinosaurus with the massive battle damage on the side, and Mario with his tons of sound effects, like his fists, his feet, and then the button on the top of his head too.
Mario.
And there's also the question of which one is heavier. Let's first check out Mario here, pretty heavy, and then the Spinosaurus. Actually, they're probably right around the same weight, so even though the Spinosaurus is taller, they're the same weight. Now who do you think would win, Mario or the Spinosaurus? For our next predator, we've got the mighty Giganotosaurus dinosaur. This figure is from the Jurassic World Dominion movie, and I'm sure you remember the awesome battle it had against the T-Rex and the Therizinosaurus in the movie. Now this figure's pretty cool. It's got the green body with the black detailing. It's got the huge spine running along its back. It's got a swivel tail here, which is pretty unusual for figures of this size. And it has two action buttons on its body. There's a hidden action button right here that activates this huge swinging chomping action. It's got some sound effects too. And then there's actually a hidden action button underneath its tail here for a smaller chomping action. A pretty cool roaring too. So now let's face it off against Mario. And now it looks like Mario is the taller figure of the two. The Giganotosaurus is maybe 3 or 4 inches smaller than Mario. And since Mario is now the larger figure, I would bet that he's the heavier figure. Let's see here, there's Mario. Now let's lift up the Giganotosaurus. You know, it's pretty close, but I think Mario is the heavier figure now. Now the Giganotosaurus is a very fierce predator, but Mario is no easy fight. Who do you think would win, the Giganotosaurus or Mario? next predator is a massive Pyroraptor figure. This, I believe, is the largest Pyroraptor I have in my entire collection. It's got some really cool feather texturing all over its body, especially along the back of its face, on its back, and on its tail. It's got some huge marbled eyes as well. And this figure is pretty special because it is actually battery operated. So there's a little switch here that I'm gonna turn on and it'll come to life. And you can actually interact with it by pressing right here. And check that out. It moves, it chomps, and it has sound effects all on its own. Now let's bring it over to face off against Mario. And this Pyroraptor is already ready to fight. Now this time Mario is quite a bit taller than the Dinosaur Predator figure here. There's probably a 5 or 6 inch difference between Mario and the Pyroraptor figure, but which one is heavier? Let's see. Mario here is decently heavy, and the Pyroraptor here, let's lift it up. Oh, you know what? I think that the Pyroraptor is heavier this time. And that kind of makes sense, because, I mean, look at the size of this thing. There's a lot of plastic on this, and there's motors and batteries in this thing as well. Now, this Pyroraptor figure is one of my favorites because it is battery operated, and you can interact with it. You can get all sorts of chomping actions and stuff. But Mario can do many of the same thing, but just in his own way with the sound effects and with the music. But either way, who do you think would win in a battle? Mario or the Pyroraptor? The next predator dinosaur is the Yangchuanosaurus figure. This predator dinosaur is also from Jurassic World Dominion, specifically from the Massive Action series. It's got the green body with the yellow underbelly and the brown detailing on top with the orange crown on the top of its head, which is one of my favorite things. And it's got some massive actions. First, you can move the tail back and forth to swing the head and torso up and down and back and forth. And there's a button on its tail to chomp the jaw too. Now let's face this predator off against Mario. And now the predator dinosaur is a whole lot smaller than Mario. Both in height, there's probably a 4-inch difference between the two in terms of which one is taller, and in weight. I bet you that Mario is a lot heavier than this Yangchuanosaurus. And it certainly is. This dinosaur figure doesn't have any motors or batteries in it, so that's what makes it quite a bit more lightweight, besides the fact that it's a whole lot smaller. So now, who do you think would win in a fight? But before you answer, I've got a bit of a surprise for you. And that is this massive Bowser figure from the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I figured it'd be cool to get another figure from the Mario series, so let's open it up. And here is the Bowser figure. And this figure is pretty cool. It's got 14 different points of articulation, so you can move the arms, the wrists, the legs around in all different directions. He's got some pretty cool coloring too with the yellow, and that fades into the green, and it's got these spikes all over its shell. But the coolest part about this figure is a hidden feature. When you press this spike, he'll actually breathe smoke, which is actually just steam, but let's check it out. Oh, there we go. You can see it a little bit right there. It is pushing out steam, so it looks like he's breathing out fire. That is pretty cool. So now we actually have a 3-way face-off. Mario versus Bowser versus the Yangchuanosaurus. Which do you think would win? Next up is another mighty predator. This one is called the Cretaceous. This dinosaur figure is from the new Epic Evolution series. So this figure has some different features that you won't see on older figures. Firstly are its teeth. They're now made out of a soft rubber, so they look a bit more realistic than they used to, I think. And instead of an attack button, it has this dial on its back that you spin back and forth for the chomping and sound effects. That's pretty interesting, but I'm not sure which I like better, the buttons or these spinning dials. And now it's time to face off the Cretaceous versus Mario. And now there's even a larger size difference between the two. The Cretaceous is probably half the size of Mario here. And Bowser over here might be around the same height, but he's definitely a whole lot heavier than the dinosaur figure. So let me know in the comments, who do you think would win, the Cretaceous or Mario? The next predator against Mario is another similar looking dinosaur compared to the last one, but this one is called the Scorpiovinator. It's got a light brown coloring over most of its body with a lighter underbelly and some bright orange detailing along its neck and on its face. And this figure is older than the Epic Evolution series, like the last figure we saw, because you can see that the teeth are hard plastic and they aren't quite as detailed and realistic looking as the other one was. But this figure still has a really cool chomping action when you press down on its body. Check out that full body chomping effect. And now it's time for Predator versus Mario. Once again, Mario towers over this dinosaur figure. It is probably twice the size as the Scorpiovinator dinosaur and a whole lot heavier too, maybe even twice the weight of the Scorpiovinator. This is quite lightweight, although it does have batteries and some speakers in it. Now let me know in the comments, who do you think would win, the Scorpiovinator or Mario? Just a few predators left. This next one is a very different looking one. This super long dinosaur is called the Sarcosuchus, and this one comes in the camo green coloring on the sides and underbelly with the clay red coloring along the top. Check out these rows of spines that go all the way down to its tail, and of course it's got a huge mouth full of teeth and a very narrow mouth too. Now it's time to face it off against Mario. And first, let's check out that size difference. This Sarcosuchus figure is probably only 3 or 4 inches tall, so then Mario is probably 4 or maybe even 5 times as tall as this predator dinosaur. And I don't think we even have to compare the weights either. I think Mario is definitely heavier than this much smaller dinosaur figure. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to mention that this Sarcosuchus has an attack feature. You saw it earlier, but there's a button on its tail to move its head around and to jump its jaw. So then, who do you think would win in a match? The Sarcosuchus or Mario? And here is our final predator and our smallest one. This dinosaur is called the Atrociraptor, obviously related to the Velociraptor. It has a dark orange body with some tan striping all over, including its tail, its back, and on its face too. And it's pretty adjustable. You can move the arms, the legs, the neck, and the jaw you can open and close manually. Now this dinosaur looks pretty cool, but sadly doesn't have any attack feature. So let's go ahead and place it up against the Mario figure. And this is the biggest size difference between the Predator and Mario so far. This dinosaur is super small compared to Mario. It probably reaches only the top of Mario's leg, and it might be only like 10% of the weight of the Mario figure. So who do you think would win in a battle? The Atrociraptor figure or the Mario figure? Let's get started with the largest quadrupedal that I have, which is this huge Dreadnoughtus figure. This dinosaur has the blue with the tan striping, and it has one of the longest necks out of any of my figures. So let's set this figure on the very left because this is my largest dinosaur. Next up in size is one of these Brachiosaurus figures. Let's first choose this one right here. It's got the classic brown coloring, and you can move its legs, its neck, and you can even open and close its mouth. Let's move this Brachiosaurus right next to the Dreadnoughtus. Check out that size difference between these two. Next up, we've got another Brachiosaurus figure, but this one is newer. This one is part of the Jurassic World Dominion collection. Now its body shape is pretty much the same as this one right here, but you'll notice that it has some different coloring And the best part of all is that it has this reflective blue coloring along its face. Next up in size, we've got this huge Apatosaurus figure. This dinosaur is quite a bit smaller than the Brachiosaurus figures, but it's still quite large. It has the green with the light green striping, and I'm sure you recognize this dinosaur from the Jurassic World Dominion movie. Let's keep going. I think the next biggest in size is this Amargosaurus figure. I think this figure's pretty old and that they don't make it anymore, but it's really cool because it has these two huge spines running down its neck and two action buttons, one to move the neck up and down and one to swing the tail back and forth. All right, let's set this down right next to the Apatosaurus. Wow, look at that size difference. Next up in size, let's go with the Jurassic World Dominion Ankylosaurus figure. This figure features the clay red and brown coloring. It's got tons of spikes all over its body, and it has the tail that controls the head and the chomping action too. Let's set the Ankylosaurus down next in line. Oh, those are pretty close in size. Next up, let's go with the Pentaceratops figure. This dinosaur has one of the largest frills that I've seen out of any dinosaur. Plus, it's got horns all along its frill and on its face too. And it has two action buttons, one to move the head up and down, and one to move the torso side to side. All right, let's set this down next to the Ankylosaurus. Next up in size, I think we gotta go with the Stegosaurus figures here. This first one has brown, it's got green, it's got the clay red coloring, and like all the other Stegosaurus figures, it has a tail swinging attack button. Let's set down this first Stegosaurus next to the Pentaceratops. And I think all these Stegosauruses are going to be pretty similar in size, so let's just go with this one next. It's got the blue-gray coloring with the darker coloring along the top, and the pink underbelly, and of course the swinging tail attack. Let's get this Stegosaurus down next in line. This next one is brighter in color. It's almost a teal-green color. It's still got a lighter underbelly, and it has some cool highlights right along its spine. This one will be our third Stegosaurus in line. And our fourth and final Stegosaurus of this collection is this gigantic Trackers Stegosaurus. And this is actually a very new figure. It's got some really cool coloring all over its body, plus it comes with this crazy looking Dino Tracker backpack. Let's set it down as our fourth Stegosaurus. Next in size, I think, is this Diabloceratops figure. Check out these super huge horns on the top of its head and on the front of its face too. It's got a fiery red color over most of its body and the light tan underbelly, plus there's an action button to swing its head back and forth. Let's put this down next in size. Up next, let's go with this Spinosaurus in the light gray blue with the tan detailing. And check out those super dark black eyes. That's pretty crazy looking. Let's put this one down next in line, and you can use the tail to move the head too. I've got another Spinosaurus figure right here that is probably the exact same in size, but it's got different coloring. This one is the green with the tan detailing, and this one has some bright yellow eyes. So let's set this one down too, and look at that. This one also controls the head by moving the tail. It looks like we've got a few Triceratops figures up next. This first one has the dark brown with the two tones of blue along its back, and just like these Spinosaurus figures, you can use the tail to control the head. Let's go ahead and grab this next Triceratops figure with the gray and darker gray detailing along the top. But with this figure, instead of the tail that controls the head, there are two action buttons on its back. One controls the head for roaring, and the other controls its tail for swinging back and forth. Now let's set this down next in line as the second Triceratops. And this next Triceratops has some green coloring with brown along its frill and along its back too. And this Triceratops has an even different action. When you press down on its body, it does a roar, and it has sound effects too. Oh, you know what? I think there's another Triceratops here that I didn't even notice. This one has the clay red coloring with the brown detailing along the top and on the frill. And this one has one single action button on its back for the roaring action. This next quadrupedal dinosaur is a Kentrosaurus. It's got the spines running all along its back and these ginormous spikes coming right out of its sides. And this one has a pretty cool action that when you slide this back, it swings its torso back and forth to stab with those huge spikes. Now this dinosaur might be a little taller with its spines compared to the Triceratops, but we're gonna place it right here anyways. For the next up in size, we're gonna go with this dinosaur. This is the Edmontosaurus. Its front legs are smaller compared to its back legs. It's got some pretty cool coloring on its face and on that crown on the top of its head. And like many of these other cool figures that we've seen, you can use the tail to control the head. And it has sound effects too. Next, we're gonna go with this Iguanodon figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's mostly tan, it's got some brown striping with the lighter streaks on the top. And with this figure, when you press down on its back, it has a chomping action. All right, next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is a Sarcosuchus. It's got a long and narrow snout with tons of teeth. And the coolest part is that you can use the tail to control the head. The next dinosaur that we're gonna choose is this Ankylosaurus figure right here. This one is clay red, it's got some brown, and its spikes are a lighter color. And I think this one was from Jurassic World Dominion because when you press down on its back, it swings its tail back and forth. Let's go ahead and grab this next Ankylosaurus for our next in size. This one is a really old figure from Jurassic World. I think this one is from the first movie. And check out the size difference between the two. Next up, we've got two baby Brachiosaurus figures right here. And they each have their own unique color. This first one's gray, it's got some dark brown purple coloring along the top. And this other one is a much brighter color. It's a bright green with dark green right along the top. So let's set these down right next to the Ankylosauruses. Next in size, let's see, I think it might be this dinosaur, which I believe is called a Styracosaurus. It's got some super bright coloring along the front of its frill, which is really interesting, and it has some darker detailing along its back. Now let's set this down right next to the baby Brachiosauruses. I think next we're gonna go with this Miragaia figure from Jurassic World Dominion. Like the Kentrosaurus, this one also has some huge spikes sticking right out of its sides. Now let's set it down right next to the Styracosaurus. Next, why don't we go with this dinosaur? This is the Chialingosaurus. It looks somewhat similar to a Stegosaurus because it's got those spines in the top, but the spikes in the very back are quite a bit different, and it has these tiny little spikes coming out of its front legs. And let's set this one down next in line. Next, let's go with this crazy looking dinosaur. This is the Shringosaurus, and it's got a huge and very long neck. It's got those two evil looking horns on the top of its head too. Very wild looking. Let's put this next in line. For the next in size, why don't we go with this one? This is a Calavosaurus. It's got a dark blue body with some orange detailing. It's got some light blue stripes along its tail and on its mouth as well. And it looks like we're running out of space at the edge of the table, so we're gonna start a new line right in front. For our next in size, let's go with this baby Triceratops figure with extreme battle damage right on the side. And let's put this one down right next to the Calavosaurus. This next dinosaur, I believe, is called a Zuniceratops. It's got a pretty bright body, and it's got two horns on the front of its head. So let's set this down right next to the baby Triceratops. They look pretty similar. For our next one, why don't we go with this baby Stegosaurus figure? And you may notice that this baby Stegosaurus came as part of a set with this huge Stegosaurus right here. You can see that they're very similar in color. So let's set this down next in size, next to the Zuniceratops. And next we'll go with these two Dimetrodon figures. This first one is the older figure of the two, and this figure has an action that when you move its tail, it chomps its jaw open and closed. So we're gonna put that right there. And this other Dimetrodon figure is from Jurassic World Dominion, so it's pretty new. And it's got a much brighter spine, although it does not have any action buttons. So we're gonna set it down right next to the other one. Next up, it looks like we've got a Sauropelta figure. This is a pretty small figure, but it has some huge spikes on its back in comparison. It's really cool. So let's set this one down next in line. Here we have a small dinosaur. This is a Mosasaurus. It's got blue with some black detailing along the top and the yellow underbelly. And we'll set this down right here. And finally, we have two Minmi figures. This first one right over here is mostly green in color. Its spikes are more of a yellow color, but it has a ton of spikes along its back for protection. And this second Minmi figure right here is red in color, and its spikes are a bright white in contrast. But other than that, it is pretty identical to the other minifigure. First up, we're gonna go with the massive Giganotosaurus. And the inaccuracies of this dinosaur have to do with its outer protective layer. You can see this big spine and all these spikes running along its back, and it's speculated that the Giganotosaurus didn't quite have what's shown in here and in the movies. In addition, the arms might have actually been smaller than what was shown here and in the movie. And in Jurassic World Dominion, it was said that the Giganotosaurus is the largest terrestrial carnivore, but it's still widely debated whether it was the Giganotosaurus, the Spinosaurus, or the T-Rex. Next up, we're gonna go with the mighty Tyrannosaurus Rex. And the first inaccuracy is that it is speculated that T-Rexes actually did not have the iconic roar that you know from the movies, but rather it used low-pitched rumbling noises to communicate. And it is also thought that T-Rexes had a thin layer of a feather coating on their body, which if you saw the prologue in Jurassic World Dominion, you saw that they did add that in. And this figure right here is the Terran T-Rex with this massive tearing action. And I've also got this slightly smaller T-Rex with the battle damage and the orange coloring on its body. Check out how wide that jaw opens. Next up is the mighty Spinosaurus dinosaur. This is another one of the dinosaurs that might have been one of the largest terrestrial carnivores. And what might be inaccurate about this figure and the Spinosauruses in the movie is the tail. They think that the tail now had a more paddle-shaped instead of kind of a more narrow, round-shaped tail. And this specific Spinosaurus figure is pretty special because this is the Battle Damage Edition Spinosaurus that you can open up right here to reveal the battle damage underneath. And you can even press this button to spin the insides. Next up is one of my favorite carnivores, the Carnotaurus. And what might be inaccurate about this dinosaur is that it might have actually been a more slender dinosaur than this muscular dinosaur that you see right here and in the movies. And this figure right here is actually the Epic Attack Carnotaurus. So there's a button on its back for the chomping action and these hidden buttons on its side for more sound effects and lights. And I also wanted to throw in an older version of the Carnotaurus from Jurassic World here. Still has a very identical coloring, but on this figure, you can move the tail around to move the head and to chomp the jaw. Next up is the Allosaurus, and this figure is from the Epic Evolution series. So a really cool feature it has are these spikes that actually pop out of its back, which obviously probably isn't true to real life, but it's pretty cool. But another inaccuracy in both some of the figures from Jurassic World and in the movies are its wrists. Sometimes the wrists are shown facing upwards like this, or supinated, and at other times the wrists are shown pronated or facing downwards. And it is thought that they had supinated wrists like this figure, but in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, they showed the wrists actually pointing downwards. I've got a few other Allosauruses in this collection that we can check out and compare as well. You can see that both of their wrists are kind of facing inwards to the side, and both these figures are quite a bit smaller than the Epic Evolution figure I showed you. But they each still have their own chomping action, which is pretty cool. And this one's got a slide lever action with sound effects. The next Jurassic World dinosaur with inaccuracies is the Apatosaurus dinosaur. And in the first Jurassic World movie, the Apatosaurus was shown to be chewing its food, but they don't do that. In real life, they actually swallow it whole, and then they use stones in their stomach to help digest it. And of course, in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, the Apatosaurus was shown to be running, which probably could not happen given their gigantic size, as well as their massive weight. Next up is the Therizinosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. And this dinosaur was actually pretty accurately represented in the movies, although there is some speculation around the shape of its eyes and the strength of its claws as well. And this Therizinosaurus figure has some pretty cool actions. First, you can press down on the tail for this little chomping action, and you can move the tail side to side to swing the torso back and forth. Next up here is the Tarbosaurus dinosaur. And the first inaccuracy of this dinosaur is this row of spikes running down its back. The Tarbosaurus did not have that in real life. And when it showed up in Camp Cretaceous Hidden Adventure, the Tarbosaurus was depicted as a lot larger than it was in real life, although it still is quite a large dinosaur. Next up, we've got another super famous dinosaur from Jurassic Park. This is the Dilophosaurus. And first off, the Dilophosaurus in the first Jurassic Park movie was way smaller than it was in real life. And also the movies depict the Dilophosauruses as having these frills and poisonous venom that they can spit, whereas in real life they had neither of those things actually. I also included a smaller version of the Dilophosaurus in this collection. This one has the gray coloring with the red on its frills, and an action where you can move its tail to activate the frills and open its mouth. Next up is the massive Stegosaurus dinosaur. Now in Lost World, the Stegosaurus was depicted as larger than it was in real life. The movie showed it to be around 40 feet long, but they only grew to be around 30 feet. And interestingly, in Camp Cretaceous, it was said that the Stegosauruses shed their dorsal plates once a year, kind of like a deer and their antlers. However, I don't think there is any evidence for that actually happening in real life. Next up is the Velociraptor dinosaur. Now in the Jurassic World films, it was shown that the Velociraptors hunt in packs, but in reality, there isn't any evidence to show that they hunted in packs. Furthermore, in real life, velociraptors were actually covered in feathers, and they probably weren't as intelligent as the movies made them out to be. Next up are the Atrociraptors. I've got the small version right here, and the large basic version right here, both in the same coloring. And in the Jurassic World movies, these dinosaurs had many of the same inaccuracies as the Velociraptor, such as they are a lot smaller in real life, and they probably didn't hunt in packs, at least as far as we know. I've got another pair of raptors here. These are the Pyroraptors, made popular by the Jurassic World Dominion movie. And once again, I've got a large basic version right here, and then the smaller version right here, and this one's actually a battle damage version. You can click the battle damage on and off. Now you may remember that this dinosaur actually swam in Jurassic World Dominion, but that's not actually known whether they actually did in real life. And these dinosaurs were a bit smaller than what was shown in the movie too. Next up is the Sinoceratops. Now there's not a whole lot that's inaccurate about this dinosaur, but there is some speculation, especially from Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, about the number of holes in their frill and the location of those holes as well. Next up is the mighty Kentrosaurus dinosaur. And if you watched Camp Cretaceous, you'll remember Pierce the Kentrosaurus. And the main inaccuracy about that dinosaur was the size. Pierce was probably twice the size as Kentrosauruses are in real life. So they were a lot smaller when they lived out in the real world. And here I've got two Ceratosaurus figures, each with their own coloring. I've got the gray, red, and brown one right here, and then the dark green one. And in Jurassic Park 3 and Camp Cretaceous, the Ceratosauruses were shown as larger than what they were in real life. And you can see these horns on their heads right here. Those were thought to be more crests than horns in real life. Here is a more unusual dinosaur. This one is called the Cretaceous. And in Jurassic Park 3, it was shown that they had separated fingers rather than more hoof-like hands. In addition, in real life, they have keratinous beaks, which are beaks made out of keratin. Next up is the Ankylosaurus species, and I've got two different figures right here. The first inaccuracy is that Ankylosauruses in real life do not have these massive spikes on their side, which is kind of a disappointment because they look so cool. And secondly, in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, they were shown to be running, whereas in real life, it's very unlikely that they could run due to the size of their legs as well as the massive amount of armoring that they have on their body. Next up is the Triceratops. I've got this figure with the brown and blue coloring, and this figure and the Triceratops in the movies are a bit inaccurate in that only the juvenile Triceratops had these spikes running along the outside of its frill. And this figure here actually has a pretty cool action where you can move the tail to move the head around and get sound effects. The next dinosaur I'm going to show you in this collection is the Brachiosaurus. This dinosaur figure is massive and is from the Jurassic World Dominion collection. And the inaccuracy of this dinosaur in the movies was that in Jurassic Park, it was shown to stand up on its two back legs, whereas in real life, that would not be able to happen because of the weight and the size of this dinosaur. Here I've got an Iguanodon figure from Jurassic World Dominion, and the inaccuracies of this dinosaur in Jurassic World Dominion was that it was shown that they have a flexible tail, whereas that's probably not so in real life, and they were shown to have claws on the front feet rather than hooves. I think this is a really cool dinosaur though, and it is one of my favorite herbivore species. Here is an Albertosaurus dinosaur. Got the green body with the red coloring along the top of its head and its back. And the inaccuracy of this dinosaur is that in Jurassic Park Builder, which was a game they created that you can sadly no longer play, they showed the Albertosaurus to have 3 fingers instead of 2. So this figure is actually correct. And this figure is pretty cool too, because it is the battle damage edition, so you can see a slash on its leg right there, as well as this hidden door that reveals its stomach and the ribs that you can pull up and and down. Next up is the Edmontosaurus dinosaur. Now in Jurassic World Evolution and Jurassic World Evolution 2, there were a couple inaccuracies. First was that its tail was actually pretty flexible in Jurassic World Evolution, whereas in real life, it's a lot more stiff. And Jurassic World Evolution showed them to have claws on their front feet, whereas in real life it was more like hooves, just like this figure here. And like many of the other herbivore figures that I've shown, you can move the tail on this figure to move the head around in a super lifelike way. This next dinosaur is the Concavinator, and this one is actually from the Hammond collection, so it is pretty cool. In Jurassic World the game, it was shown walking on all fours, but it could probably not do this in real life because of the direction of its wrists. And actually with this figure here, it is shown with 4 fingers, whereas in real life, they only had 3 fingers. Next up is the Pachycephalosaurus dinosaur. And although I don't think there's too much that's inaccurate about this dinosaur, in Jurassic Park Explorer, they showed this dinosaur to be way larger than it was in real life. These dinosaurs are pretty cool though, and this figure is pretty cool because it actually has a tail action for activating the headbutting. And here is the Herrerasaurus figure. And the inaccuracies of this dinosaur is that in Jurassic Park, the game, this dinosaur was shown with wrists that face downwards towards the ground, or pronated wrists, as opposed to these supinated wrists, or facing to the sides and upwards. This Godzilla is the largest Godzilla figure that I have. It stands over a foot tall, and it is 20 inches long from head all the way to the tail. It's got a bunch of texturing all over its body and these huge spikes right on its back, the iconic 3 rows of spines. And this figure has 6 different points of articulation, 2 for the arms, 2 for the feet, and then 2 different points for its tail. 1 up here, and then a smaller point back here. Now let's meet the first Indominus Rex to face off against Godzilla. This is my super colossal I-Rex. This figure was released in 2020 as part of the Primal Attack toy line. It's got huge arms with spikes on the elbows. It's also got those spikes along its neck. And coolest of all is that this I-Rex has a stomach compartment. So you can feed this I-Rex either smaller dinosaurs, or in this case, a small human. And then you can release the figures in its stomach compartment right down here. Now it's time to face off against Godzilla. And first off, look at that size difference. This Godzilla figure is quite large, but it's still very small in comparison to this super colossal figure. And I'm pretty sure that Godzilla is more lightweight too. Let's check it out. And this super colossal figure, oh boy, yep, that's probably 2 or 3 times the weight of this Godzilla figure. Now then, who do you think would win, Godzilla or the super colossal Indominus Rex? Our next Indominus Rex figure is the Destroy and Devour I-Rex figure. This figure stands at about 8 inches tall and is actually 22 inches long from its head to its tail, so a little bit longer than Godzilla. And it's got this action button on its tail to activate the chomping action. And if you look, you can see that there's actually a little stomach compartment in its mouth to store smaller dinosaurs. And there's a secondary action right here on its back that activates its claw slashing action. Now let's face the figure off against Godzilla. So now the Indominus Rex appears to be the slightly shorter figure, but as I said earlier, the Indominus Rex is actually a little bit longer from tail to head than the Godzilla figure is. And now let's check out the weight between the two. There's the I-Rex, and here's the Godzilla figure. You know, they're pretty similar. I think Godzilla wins by a tiny bit when it comes to weight. Now comment below, who do you think would win, Godzilla or the Destroy and Devour Indominus Rex? The next Indominus Rex figure is a pretty special one. This is the Dino Hybrid Indominus Rex figure. Now this figure was actually made for the first movie, and it was made by Hasbro and not Mattel like these newer figures. And it's got a few special features. First off is this coloring with the bright red on its back and the gold on its hands and on its underbelly. That is very unusual for an I-Rex figure. It's got this hidden button right here on its back to activate the spikes. And it's also motorized, so if you pull down on its arm, its mouth actually has a chomping action. But I gotta say, the one thing I do not like about this figure is that it can't really stand up on its legs. It was just designed pretty poorly so that it has to lean back on its tail like this. as many of the older Hasbro figures have to do. Now let's face it off against Godzilla. Now off the bat, it looks like the I-Rex figure is taller, although it is only taller because it's leaning back on its tail. If it was actually standing, you can see that they're actually really close to the same height. But let's also see the weight difference between the two. This one has some batteries and a motor in it, so I suspect it's gonna be a lot heavier. Now let's lift up Godzilla here, and yeah, the I-Rex figure is a little bit heavier, not as much as I thought it would be. But now it's time. Who would win, Godzilla or the hybrid Indominus Rex? Next up is the extreme damage Indominus Rex. This figure features more of the classic gray coloring along its body, but the cool part is when you press this button up top right here, it actually reveals the battle damage on the side. Look at that, there's some red underneath there that you can turn on and off. Plus it's also got the button on its tail for the jaw chomping action. And look at that, even this figure has a small storage compartment in its mouth so it can eat smaller dinosaurs. Now it's time for the face-off against Godzilla. This Indominus Rex figure is almost 10 inches high, so not quite as tall as the Godzilla figure, but it is longer. This figure is 23 inches long from the tail to the head, so a little bit longer than Godzilla once again. And now let's check out in terms of weight, which one's heavier? Oh, this one's pretty heavy. It's got some batteries in it. And now let's see the Godzilla here. Not too much lighter, but the Indominus Rex once again is the heavier dinosaur. So now who would win, the battle damaged Indominus Rex or Godzilla? Up next for the I-Rexes is a custom painted Indominus Rex. Now this is actually another Destroy and Devour Indominus Rex, which we saw earlier back here. But this one has been meticulously repainted with these bright and exciting new colors. There's the blue along its underbelly, then it transforms into the purple here, and then the orange and black on its back. And don't forget its really cool chomping action. Now it's time to face off against Godzilla. Standing upright all the way here, the Indominus Rex is the taller one, although it normally stands around this height, so they're actually once again pretty close in size. And as with the earlier Destroy and Devour figure, they're pretty similar in weight, although I think the I-Rex is a little bit heavier. Now this is one crazy and dangerous looking I-Rex. So then, who do you think would win, Godzilla or the custom painted I-Rex? This next figure is another vintage Indominus Rex. This one I believe was released in 2015 for the first Jurassic World movie, so it's pretty old, and this is one of the only Indominus Rexes that I have that has this rubbery texture along its head and neck. And a cool and unique feature about this figure is when you press down on the arm, it actually chomps the jaw with sound effects. Now let's face it off against Godzilla. And these two figures are almost very close in terms of height. I think the I-Rex is a little bit taller generally. And the I-Rex is definitely the older figure, but let's see who is the heavier figure. There's the I-Rex, and here's Godzilla. You know what? I think this time Godzilla is the heavier figure, even though the I-Rex has some batteries in it for the sound effects. So who do you think would win in this battle? The I-Rex figure from the first Jurassic World movie or Godzilla? Next, I've got a little surprise for you, and that is this new Godzilla figure from the upcoming The New Empire movie. Now let's have a look at it. First off, the blue coloring is a bit brighter compared to the older version of Godzilla. And obviously the spikes are this bright red color, and that bright red goes all the way down to the tip of his tail. And check it out right here, there's actually a button for the sound effects, so let's hear some of those. So it's got those two sound effects, and overall it's pretty cool, but definitely a whole lot smaller than the older Godzilla figure that I have. And it does look like this Godzilla figure is kind of skinnier too. This larger one here is quite bulky in the torso. And here's the first I-Rex to face off against the new Godzilla figure. This is the Dino Trackers I-Rex figure. And this is one of my newest I-Rex figures that I've bought. You can tell that it's a bit more slim in its design compared to these other older figures. Those are huge and bulky, but this dinosaur seems a little bit more lightweight and actually a bit smaller in size overall. But it's still got some cool action features. Over here on the tail, there's a button, and you can move the tail back and forth for chomping the jaw and for twisting the head back and forth. And it's got these glowing green lights coming out of its neck too. So now let's face off the I-Rex versus the new Godzilla figure. Now obviously in terms of size, this I-Rex figure is a whole lot larger. It might be 2 or 3 times the size of this Godzilla figure. And I bet it's obviously heavier as well, just given its size. Now then, who do you think would win between these two? The Dino Trackers I-Rex or the new Empire Godzilla figure? This next figure is the Sound Surge Indominus Rex, released for Jurassic World Dominion. It's quite a bit smaller in size compared to many of the other figures that we've seen so far, but it still has the classic gray coloring with some brown detailing along its face and back, and of course the orange eyes. And the special feature of this figure is the sound effects. Right here's the speaker, and then there's a button up top, so let's hear some of those sounds. Now let's face it off against the Godzilla figure. And now this smaller Godzilla figure is taller than the I-Rex. You know, probably by a good 2 or 3 inches. And now let's see which one's heavier. This one still has batteries and a speaker in it, so it's still pretty heavy. But so does this Godzilla figure, although I think the Indominus Rex figure is slightly heavier. Now then, who would win in this battle? The Sound Surge I-Rex or the new Empire Godzilla? Here is the Feeding Frenzy Indominus Rex figure, released as part of the Camp Cretaceous collection. The proportions of this Indominus Rex is very different. It's got this giant head and the smaller body. Now there's a hidden button on its nose for some sound effects. And it has a chomping action as well. First, you press down on the tail to open up its mouth, and then you feed it its food, or in my case, my finger right here, and it'll chomp down right onto the food. Now it's time to face off against Godzilla. And once again, the new Godzilla figure is slightly taller. The Feeding Frenzy figure is probably 2 inches shorter. And let's see, in terms of weight, the Feeding Frenzy figure's decently heavy. And let's check out the Godzilla figure. And I think the Indominus Rex is the heaviest of these two figures. Now comment below, who would win in a battle, the Feeding Frenzy I-Rex or Godzilla? And the final I-Rex of this Versus collection is this smaller I-Rex from the original Jurassic World movie. So this one was also made by Hasbro. Now it has a lot of the iconic gray coloring, but you'll notice that the top is this more green-gray coloring, which is interesting. And it's got a few special features. First off is this hidden battle damage right on the side that you can click open to reveal its insides and some bones. And this figure has a chomping action. When you move the tail up and down, it actually moves his head up and down and closes his jaw too. So then let's have our final face-off, the I-Rex versus Godzilla. Now this I-Rex figure doesn't really stand up on its own anymore, so it's kind of hard to say which figure is taller, but I would bet you that the Godzilla figure is the tallest just by guessing and trying to get him to pose in his normal position. And as for who is the heavier figure, let's see here, the I-Rex figure is pretty lightweight, and remember the Godzilla figure actually has batteries in it, so this one is definitely the heavier of the two. Now finally, who would win in this battle? The smaller I-Rex figure or the Godzilla figure? And here is the entire collection. Go ahead and comment below which of these Indominus Rex figures was your favorite. And also, which of these two Godzilla figures was your favorite? The smaller one or the larger one? The first dinosaur is this massive Indominus Rex Predator from the new Dino Tracker series. It has a button on the tail to activate the sound effects and chomping. And check out that green lighting in its neck too. Next up is another massive predator. This is the Spinosaurus. And this one is actually pretty special because it is in the battle damage edition. And you can see the battle damage right here on the side that you can open right up and press a button to spin around. Way in the back here, this predator is another Indominus Rex, and this one is the Extreme Battle Damage Edition. Check that out. You can turn on and off the battle damage with the sound effects, and you can press the button on its tail for the chomping action. Next up, I've got a Giganotosaurus figure. This figure is almost as large as the Indominus Rex figures, and it has a button on its back to swing the torso around, as well as chomp its jaw open and shut. Next up is the new 93 Real Feel Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. It has the all red body and it actually has a stomach compartment so you can feed it smaller dinosaurs. Way in the back here is a custom painted Indominus Rex. It's been changed to be camouflage green and they added a bunch of blood around its jaw. Here is the Dino Trackers Tyrannosaurus Rex figure with the headpiece, and it has one button on its back for the chomping action. Next up is another Indominus Rex figure, but this one is actually a hybrid one from the first Jurassic World movie. It's got some hidden spikes that you can pop up, and it's even battery operated for some jaw-chomping action. This predator is the Hammond Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. It features an extremely posable body and amazing detailing and coloring. Here is another battle damaged dinosaur. This one is the T-Rex edition, and right on its side, just like the Indominus Rex, it has the battle damage that you can turn on and off. Next up is this huge Triceratops figure. This is a whole lot larger than my other Triceratops, and it comes in the classic brown coloring. Next up is the Grab and Growl Indoraptor figure from Fallen Kingdom. It has an action button for slashing its arms and for chomping its jaw. This is the Scorpius Rex figure from Camp Cretaceous. It has a dark green body and is fairly posable. You can move the arms, the legs, and the tail and manually open and close the mouth. Here is the Pyroraptor figure from Jurassic World Dominion. This is the basic edition, so you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, but you can't open and close the jaw. Here is a crazy looking Dilophosaurus figure from the first Jurassic World movie. It's got neon colors all over and a bit of battle damage right on the side. This next figure is the Sound Surge Tyrannosaurus Rex figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It's a lot smaller in size, and there's a button on its back for the sound effects. Now here's one massive predator figure. This is the Allosaurus in the Battle Damage edition. So just like the Spinosaurus we saw earlier, it has battle damage right on the side. This dinosaur, I believe, is called the Kentrosaurus. It looks a lot like a Stegosaurus, and it has these massive spikes right on its side, and there's an action button on its back to flip those spikes back and forth. Here is a Carcharodontosaurus figure in the blue, brown, and orange edition, and it has a single action button on its back for a chomping motion. Up next from the new Dino Tracker series is the Sinotyrannus figure. It's got this cool headpiece that goes all the way down to its back, and it has two action buttons, one for chomping the jaw and one for swinging the tail. Here is a Cryolophosaurus figure, I believe from Camp Cretaceous. It is in the dark blue version, and on this figure you can move the tail around to move the head with sound effects. This is another big predator figure. This is a Carnotaurus figure. This one's a bit older. It has the bright orange and red coloring and the button on its tail for chomping its jaw. And here is a newer Carnotaurus figure. This one is from Dino Trackers. You can see it still has very similar coloring, but this version actually has some buttons on its side for sound effects and lighting. Plus there is a chomping action button as well. This figure is the Stegosaurus figure in the dark blue-gray coloring, and it has a single action button on its back for swinging the tail back and forth. Oh, you know what? It looks like I've actually got two versions of this same figure. So these are twin dinosaurs right here. Up next is another Indoraptor figure, I believe also from Fallen Kingdom. This figure features a fully posable body, but no action buttons. Next is an Iguanodon figure from Jurassic World Dominion, and it features an action button when you press down on its back. This brightly colored dinosaur, I believe, is called a Scutosaurus. Check out those huge horns right underneath its chin. Here's another Indominus Rex figure. This one is from the first Jurassic World movie, and it features the battle damage right on the side that you can hide and reveal. Plus it's got an attack action when you press down on the tail. This next figure is a baby Stegosaurus figure, and this one came out pretty recently. I really love the green coloring on this. And I've got another baby dinosaur in here. This one is the juvenile Nasutoceratops figure. And for the final figure in this first bin is a mini figure in the bright green coloring with spikes all over its back. Now it's time for the second bin, but before we do, let's check out this brand new Camp Cretaceous figure, the Gallimimus from the Fierce Force series. So it's a pretty small figure, probably around the same size as my other Gallimimus figures. Got some pretty cool camo coloring with the green on the sides and the brown on the top, and it looks like there's a single action button for moving its head up and down. Now let's check out this massive predator, the Mosasaurus. This is obviously an aquatic dinosaur, and it is a super long figure. Over here I've got another Spinosaurus figure. This is the Legacy Collection version, so it has the dark green coloring with the red spine, and of course the jaw-chomping button on the top of its head. Here's another predator, and this figure's pretty old, once again from the first Jurassic World movie. This is another Indominus Rex, and this figure has some real feel skin, so its head and its neck are a soft rubber, and there's an action that when you press down on its arm, it actually opens up its mouth. Next up is another battle damage T-Rex, but this one does not have the battle damage right here on the side. Instead, it has it painted on its neck, on its chin, and other parts of its body as well. And here's another Carnotaurus figure, but this is the Sound Surge edition, so it's a whole lot smaller, and it has a single button on its back for the sound effects. Check out this new Indoraptor figure from the Dino Tracker series. It has a chomping action when you move its arms, and another chomping action when you press down on its back. This figure is from Camp Cretaceous, I believe. This is the Scorpius Rex figure. It has the yellow underbelly and the black sides, and it's got two action buttons, one to operate its jaw, and another to operate its arms. Here is the new Legacy Collection Tyrannosaurus Rex figure. I bought this one quite recently. It's got some really cool green coloring with the gray and yellow on top, and the button on the top of its head for chomping. Next up is the Hammond Collection Metriacanthosaurus figure. It's got some really cool coloring and some orange on its nose, and like all Hammond Collection figures, features a fully posable body. This predator figure is an Atrociraptor from Jurassic World Dominion. It is the basic series, so you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, but you can't open or close its mouth. Check it out, here's another Mosasaurus figure, but this one's a whole lot smaller, and it's from the first movie. It's even got some battle damage right there on the side that you can open and close. And this gigantic figure is the Stegosaurus from the Dino Tracker series. It has this huge backpack and two action buttons. The first swings its tail up and down, and the second on the other side swings its tail side to side. Next up, this crazy looking predator is called the Ichthyovenator. It's got some bright green coloring on its body and a single attack action for chomping its jaw. Here is a Ceratosaurus figure in the dark green and black coloring, and it's got an action button on its back for jaw chomping. And here's another Ceratosaurus figure. This one's a bit older. I think it might be from the Fallen Kingdom collection. It's got totally different coloring and a single button on its back for jaw chomping. This figure is an Allosaurus figure. It's got the bright blue, dark blue, and tan coloring, and two action buttons on its back, one for chomping the jaw and one for moving its arms. This figure is the Ankylosaurus figure in the clay red, brown, and tan coloring. And it has a single attack feature. When you press down on its body, it swings its tail back and forth. Here is the Albertosaurus figure in the green coloring with the battle damage on the side that you can open and close. This big figure is the Therizinosaurus from Jurassic World Dominion. It features a tail that can move the torso around and a button for jaw chomping. Here is the Metriacanthosaurus figure in the yellow and green coloring, and it has a single action button on its back for chomping its jaw. I've got a Velociraptor figure here. This is from the first Jurassic World movie, so you can actually only move its arms and its legs. Its mouth is stuck open. Here is the Hammond Collection Triceratops figure. It's in the classic brown coloring, and just like the other Hammond Collection figures, is super posable and quite detailed. Here is another Scorpius Rex figure. This is the basic edition, so you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, but you can't open and close the jaw, and it's quite a narrow dinosaur. Look how thin that is. Here is the Dryptosaurus figure from the Dino Tracker series, and it features an attack button on its back for chomping. I've got another Allosaurus figure in here with the tan and blue coloring and the single action button on its back for the chomping and sound effects. Up next is a smaller Carnotaurus figure from Jurassic World Dominion. It features the dark green and orange coloring, and you can tell it's missing a horn, just like in the movie. This figure is the Ceratosaurus figure from Camp Cretaceous, and it's got the action button on its back for the roaring and sound effects. From the Dino Tracker series is this new Diabloceratops figure in the bright red coloring, and it has the action button on its back for sound effects and moving its head. Here's a similar looking dinosaur. This is a Triceratops figure in the green and brown coloring, and it's got two actions on its back, one for moving its head and the other for moving its tail. Here is the Eocarcharia figure from the Dino Tracker series. It's got feather texturing all over its body and a single action button on its back for the sound effects. Next up is a Baryonyx figure in the bright green coloring, and it has that same action button on its back for the chomping action. This crazy looking dinosaur is called the Irritator. It's got tons of different colors on its body and the action button on its back to move its head around with sound effects. And here is yet another Indoraptor figure. This one is the basic edition, so you can move its arms, its legs, and its tail, and it still has that really awesome coloring. This is the Hammond Collection Concavinator figure with the blue, the bright orange, and a little bit of brown coloring. Also from the Hammond Collection is this Irritator figure. It is in the gray and yellow coloring, and it has some really awesome detailing all over its whole body. And I've got another Triceratops figure. This one is from Jurassic World Dominion, and when you press down on its back, you get a roaring action. This is the Baryonyx Grim figure with the tan, bright green, and dark green coloring. And with this figure, you can use the tail to control the head. Here's another Hammond Collection figure. This one is the Ankylosaurus figure. So it is superposable just like the others, and it's quite a bit larger compared to my other Ankylosaurus figures. Next up, this crazy looking dinosaur is called the Sarcosuchus. And with this figure, you can use the tail to control the head and chomp the jaw. Next, from the Amber Collection, this predator is the Velociraptor. It comes in the brown with darker brown striping and is superposable. Here is the Sound Surge Giganotosaurus figure. It's a whole lot smaller compared to the Giganotosaurus that I showed you earlier, and let's check out those sound effects. This is a basic Velociraptor figure in the orange coloring. Check out those bright yellow eyes. Next up is a pretty wild looking figure. This is a Dilophosaurus figure, and when you press down on the tail, you get a chomping action. And here we've got another Dilophosaurus figure, but this one actually has the frills that you can pull out to the front. Here is another Velociraptor figure from the first Jurassic World movie. So you can adjust its legs and its arms, but you can't control its mouth or its tail. And here's our first winged dinosaur of this collection. This is a gigantic Pteranodon figure in the red and blue coloring. Next up is this Allosaurus figure in the dark green, white, and red coloring, and it has the action button on its back for the chomping and sound effects. This figure is the Regaloceratops from the new Dino Tracker series. It's got a bright yellow body and an action button on its back for moving its head with sound effects. Here is a Pyroraptor figure from the Gujitsu series. This figure is super stretchy, and if you look close inside, you can see that there's actually feathers inside of the goo. This is a hybrid T-Rex Dilophosaurus figure from the first Jurassic World movie. It's super bright with this orange and the shiny gold on top, and it's even got some battle damage on the side. Also from the first Jurassic World movie is this miniature Spinosaurus figure. It also has the battle damage on the side, and you can control the head by moving the tail. Here is a smaller Velociraptor figure in the yellow and brown coloring. And check it out, it's got the battle damage right on the side that you can open and close. Here is a Herrerasaurus figure in the green and brown coloring. And check that out, it also has the battle damage right there on the side. Look at this, I've got the Velociraptor Beta figure, and it even has a little dial on its back so that you can open and close its mouth. Here is an Allosaurus figure from the first Jurassic World movie. It's got the bright yellow and red on its body, and you can use the tail to control the head. I've got another winged dinosaur here. This one is a Dimorphodon figure in the bright red with some orange and yellow on its wings. Here's another Dilophosaurus figure. This one is mostly purple, but it has tons of yellow, orange, and red on its frills. And check this out, here's a bunch more Velociraptor figures. This first one is green and brown, and it has some green specks on its side, which is pretty cool. Here is a miniature Hammond Collection Velociraptor, so this figure is super posable. There's also this classic brown Velociraptor figure with the reflective green eyes. And then I've got two Velociraptor blue figures in here. This first one is a classic one without any special features, but this one right here is actually spring-loaded in the legs, so it'll actually jump up into the air when you press down on it. Oh, looks like I missed a few other raptor figures. I've got a sneaking green Velociraptor figure here, and I've got a white with brown stripes Atrociraptor figure. Here is a Monolothosaurus from Camp Cretaceous in the dark green, yellow, and red coloring. There's this Stygimoloch figure in the red-orange coloring with the striping on the sides, and with an attack that when you press down on its tail, it activates the headbutting action. Here is another Gallimimus figure, but this one is in a tan coloring and it has some striping along the top. Next, there's this smaller dinosaur that I actually can't remember the name of this species, but it has some pretty cool red and blue coloring. Next is another winged dinosaur. This is another Pteranodon figure. It's mostly gray, but it looks like it has some purple detailing on its face and on its feet. And there's a single action button on its back for flapping the wings. And there's this weird looking little dinosaur. I think it might be an Atrociraptor. You can actually turn it on so it's battery operated, and then it'll move around. And it's got some sound effects too. Next up in this collection are a few Snap Squad figures. I believe this first one here is a T-Rex figure. I've also got the Dilophosaurus figure in this collection. And then finally, an older Carnotaurus figure. And for the final four, I've got a bunch of super miniature figures. I've got Velociraptor Blue in a super tiny figure. There's also this Indoraptor figure in the crawling pose. And here is a Stegosaurus figure with the brown and green coloring. And finally, but certainly not least, a miniature Mosasaurus figure. Want to see more dino videos? Click the subscribe button now.